Welcome to my January and February wrap-up. I don't know if I'm going to do many more of these. It seems a little bit redundant since every book I'm reading gets talked about in a different video. But I guess I'll throw in the books here that aren't mystery thrillers, so I'm not talking about them a lot in other videos. And at least it will give you a summary of everything that I read in the month and where things landed. For some reason, my brain would normally put these in the order that I read them, but I think it probably makes more sense in a wrap-up to go through them with least favorite to most favorite. So let's give that a try. Groundbreaking, I know. I should probably start off by saying that I read 9 books in January and 8 books in February, so I'm at 17 books so far this year. And it was a relatively good 2 months as far as ratings are scored. I didn't score anything less than a 3 stars. However, I had a huge, I hate to call it slump in the middle of February, but I wasn't finishing any books. I continued to read, but I wasn't finishing anything. And so I just kept picking up a different book, and then I had way too many books in progress. So that impeded me a bit. But if you watched, I did a video at the end of February that was 4 books in 4 days to try to up my numbers for February. And that worked, and I'm reading again and finishing things. So it's all good now. So first off, the light. I'm up in my office and it's basically a fishbowl, so there are windows on every side of me. And I thought it would be really good because it's a bit overcast today, but I think when the sun comes out, I'm getting a lot of variation in light, and so it's going light and dark still. So hopefully we'll try to minimize that. I will do everything that fell into 3.5 stars first. Then I'll jump over to audiobooks because I don't rate those. And then I'll do everything that was in the 4-star up. So the lowest book I read was in January, and it was Assassins of Athens by Jeffrey Seeger. This is the second book in his Chief Inspector Andreas Caldas mysteries set in Greece. And I talked about this quite a bit in 2 vlogs, I think. I think it overlapped, 2 weekly vlogs. So I'll just say I gave it a 3 stars. Even though that hits the score for me to continue on with the series, I'm really hesitant to continue the series. Don't really like the protagonist. This was very Greek politic heavy and just left me scratching my head a little bit because I don't know anything about Greek politics. And I felt like if I had known Greek politics, would it have been better, or is this made up and it didn't matter? And it just made me feel insecure that I didn't know. So I will read the description of the next. Hopefully it has nothing to do with Greek politics and make a decision, but I have way too many series that I actually like and rank much higher that I could continue on with. Next, there are a few books that were better than a 3 but didn't quite make 3.5. So hey, if we're going to be granular, because it's my channel and I can be, I would say that I would give these a 3.3. The first is A Dark and Drowning Tide by Alison Saft. This is a romantasy. There's no 2 ways around it. It was billed as dark academia. Yes, it starts when they're still at college, but they quickly go on an adventure, sort of like wanted it to have National Treasure vibes, but it didn't really. I don't know. Just not one of my favorites, but it was okay. I tabbed quite a bit of it because it wasn't because I was enjoying it so much. It was more ghosts kept being mentioned, but I didn't ever understand if they were actual ghosts or not. And so that's a lot of references to ghosts without feeling like you had ghosts in the story. So yeah, it was better than a 3, but not a 3.5. Next, and I do not have a physical copy of it, was Deanna Rayburn's Silent in the Grave, which was a reread for me of the first book in her Lady Julia Gray series, which predates Veronica Speedwell and Killers of a Certain Age. I originally read this book way back when it first came out, like 10 years ago, and I gave it, at the time I was doing letter ratings, so I gave it a B. This time it's in the same place, 3.3. I think she's really good from a historical accuracy perspective, but it was much too long. I read it on my Kindle because I couldn't find my physical copy of it, which I know I kept, but I don't know where it is. But it takes place in Victorian England. Again, I think Rayburn does that really well, but really too long, very drawn out. And ironically, unlike The Seeger, even though I didn't rate it that much higher, I would like to read the next in the series to see if I enjoy it more. So I will probably do that. Next up, and I have no idea where the book is, but Sarah Pekkanen's House of Glass, which is a thriller that I gave 3.5 stars to. It was a decent thriller. I think that if we go by my recent video defining a mystery versus a thriller, although there is a murder offstage prior to the book beginning, and we do ultimately find out who the killer is over the course of the book, I didn't feel as though our protagonist was looking for the killer. She wasn't trying to solve the mystery, in my opinion. She was really there just to do her job. So I would still put it in the why it happened was important versus who done it, and call it a thriller. It was completely acceptable, nothing groundbreaking, nothing that blew me away, no wow twist of any type. So just an average rate. Moving on to 2 books that I ended up ranking at 3.7 stars. The first is The Chestnut Man by Soren Svebstrup. This is a book that took me over a year to read because it was really scary. I do think it was too long, and it's pretty gruesome. So if you do not like a lot of brutal descriptions of violence by this serial killer, you might want to take a pass on this one. But this was a police procedural. It's translated, and it was close to 4 stars for me, but 3.7, not quite there. And then a recent read that I just finished in my 4 books in 4 days, another really long one, Curious Tides by Pascal Lascelles. And this is a young adult fantasy. I've heard people call it a romantasy, but I really don't. There isn't a strong enough romance for me to say that it's a romantasy. So purely young adult fantasy. This is definitely dark academia. Completely takes place at a college of magic. And I think the thing that prevented me from giving it a higher score was the fact that I did not like our female main character, Emery. I liked our male main character, Baz, and I found myself really enjoying the chapters that were told from Baz's point of view and not liking the chapters told from Emery's point of view. I'm not a huge fan of dual perspective, so that is exactly why I think I wanted to spend more time in Baz's mind, learning the story or hearing the story from his perspective. Of course, they weren't together 100% of the time in the book, so we couldn't just hear one narrative about it. But his chapters were stronger to me and I liked him more, which in a situation like this, I don't always have to love my main characters, but since I liked him more, I wanted to spend more time with him. Switching over to audiobooks, in January I listened to The Drowned Girls by Lorith Ann White, which was okay. I don't give scores to audiobooks because I don't think I pay attention enough to them because I listen to them mostly when I'm driving, but it was just okay. It's about a serial killer and a female cop who is partnered with a male cop who she slept with without knowing that he was new on the job. And then there's this uncomfortable situation because he's technically supervising her. They don't tell anybody. She's got this family secret that she suddenly has memories of in the middle of it that I guess we were supposed to view as character development, but just seemed distracting from the plot of the story. And the serial killer was preying on young women. It was a little bit uncomfortable, and yeah, it was just okay. The next audiobook I listened to was Death and the Conjurer by Tom Mead, which was a locked room mystery, which I guess Tom Mead's series of this magician detective is all going to be locked room mysteries, but this is the first in the series. It takes place in London in the 30s, and we have a situation where a psychiatrist is at home in his office. He is visited by someone who he tells his maid to open the door to, but let him see himself into my office. That visitor leaves, and within a few minutes, a patient arrives, and when she is shown to the office door by the maid, they discover that the doctor is dead, murdered. And his office is locked from the inside. He was alive when the first visitor left because the maid heard him make a telephone call. And so the mystery is really who and how they did it in this locked room. I enjoyed the setting. I enjoyed the characters. I thought it was a good mystery. I was a little disgruntled with the explanation of how this occurred in the locked room because it was definitely something that I think would have been very logical to the police during their investigation. And so it shouldn't have been viewed as locked room, really. It was easily explained. That was a bit disappointing, but otherwise I enjoyed it, and I would probably pick up the next in the series and actually read it so that I could give a ranking to it versus listening to it on audio. And the final audio that I listened to was a fantasy. It was Paladin's Grace by T. Kingfisher. It's actually the first T. Kingfisher that I've ever listened to or read, and I quite enjoyed it. And I know I said that I was done with romantasy, and I think this is technically classified as romantasy, but I really enjoyed the story. I really enjoyed our main characters and the situations that they were in. I know that because it's a romantasy, the next book in the series is going to jump over to another set of main characters to build the romance there, and to me, that's not what I want to do. I want to keep with these characters who I really like and enjoy, and I would like them to work on the unresolved threads from the first one. So that's my really my only gripe with it, and one of the reasons that I may not continue on, because I don't want to do another romance. Enjoyed it, enjoyed the writing, enjoyed the narration of the audiobook. Just don't know if I'm going to continue on with it for that reason. I just don't want to do another romance. Books that hit 4 stars. The first one is You Better Watch Out by James Murray and Darren Wearmouth. I was really surprised how much I liked this. This is a short, quick read, and it is about a guy who is a thief. He's decided to change his ways, but before he goes straight, he's going to basically rip off an elderly couple who he sees in a grocery store with a lot of cash. They ask him if he will help them with their groceries, taking their groceries out to their car. He says, yes, that's great, because he wants to rob them. And they get to the parking lot, and before he knows it, they've injected him with something, and then he wakes up on a deserted street in the snow. And he is in this ghost town, basically, and there are other people who, like him, have been taken by this elderly couple and brought to this location. So they are trying to figure out why they're there, what's going on, is this supposed to teach them a lesson, etc. And one by one, they start getting knocked off by someone, and we quickly figure out that there is a serial killer preying on these not very nice people that have been locked up in this ghost town. It was very creative. It was inventive. There are some pretty gruesome ways that these people meet their end, so beware of that if you don't like gross stuff. And I gave it a 4, but I will say I figured it out pretty early on. So if you read a lot of thrillers, you might not be surprised by who the serial killer is. And I'll leave it at that. The other 4.0 was the only book I read for my Top Shelf Challenge in February, Chocolate Chip Cookie Murder by Joanne Fluke, which is first in the Hannah Swenson Cookie Baker series. I probably was a little more generous than I needed to be with the ranking on this book because I had the ending spoiled for me, and I wasn't sure if my criticisms to the book were because I had that ending spoiled or because it was not very good. I will say that even knowing who the killer was before it was divulged, we don't get a lot of time with a killer, and that is kind of a pet peeve of mine. So I am going to read the next in the series. I'm hoping that that one hasn't been spoiled as well, because I would like to just view it objectively and see what my rating for it would be. Coming in at just basically a point higher was Louise Penny's The Cruelest Month, which I think is 3rd in the Armand Gamache series. I have really liked this series so far. It is set in the small village of Twin Pines, Canada, Quebec, Canada, and somebody is always dying in this town, and they're bringing in this team led by Inspector Gamache to figure out who done it. I love the quirky townspeople. I love the enclosed village setting, and I like Gamache and his logic. However, the thing that detracted from this case was that it was really split between what had occurred in the town and a case from Gamache's past that has been lingering. And there was so much emphasis on this personal issue with Gamache that the resolution of the murder was almost second. It just wasn't as important. It didn't have the emphasis that the previous cases had. So I still gave it a 4.1, but I'm hoping that the next in the series gets back more into the stride of what I like about the series. Just a little bit about that at a 4.2 was Beneath the Surface by Kara Ruda. This was a book that I read because she was one of the authors at the Creepy Book Club retreat in Scottsdale. And I had never read any of her writing before, so I wanted to read something either before I got there or while I was there. And I read the majority of it. None of the authors really talked specifics about any of their books, so there were no spoilers. And then I got home, and this is where I hit my reading slump, was when I had so many books that I had started and not finished. So I finally settled down in the 4 books in 4 days, and I finished this book. I mentioned in that 4 books in 4 days video, I don't know how I would categorize this, because I don't even think it was a thriller. I don't know. I know she categorizes it as a thriller, but there is no crime until the end of the book. Like that end of the book has the crime. And it was just this family drama. Like, who's going to inherit? They're all bad people. Somebody has to inherit. They're all bad people. But the writing was really good. And I'm shocked that I enjoyed the writing so much because nothing really happens. It is very atmospheric, though. They're on this yacht sailing to Catalina. And I've sailed to Catalina before, so got the vibe of what she was going for. But yeah, might be rating it a tad nicer because of the circumstances under which I read the book. A cozy mystery that I really liked was Rhys Bowen's Her Royal Spyness, which is the first in her Royal Spyness series. It's a little bit of a misnomer. She's not really a spy. Maybe she becomes one in later books in the series. That could be interesting. This is about Lady Georgie. She is one of the very far removed heirs to the British throne, but she's basically penniless after her father gambles away the family's money. And she and her brother and his wife are living on the estate in Scotland. She realizes that she probably is not going to have that much of a future if she doesn't get out of Scotland. She makes her way to the family home in London, where there are no servants, and she's learning to do everything for herself for the first time in her life, and she realizes that she needs to get a job. Her prospects are either she gets a job, she supports herself, or she marries a foreign prince that the palace lines up for her, or she can go again live in the middle of nowhere with Queen Victoria's only surviving daughter. She decides to get a job, and along the way, the man who her dad had a lot of gambling debts with ends up dead in the bathtub of the house in London, and her brother is accused of killing him because he was going to go after the estate in Scotland next. I think Bowen has done a great job setting up the characters, establishing the world that they live in, and writing about the time and place. And I think it was a really well thought out and plotted mystery. Really enjoyed it. Just had some nits to pick with it. Couldn't quite give it a 5, but loved it, and we'll be continuing on with the series. 2 more books from writers who were part of the Creepy Book Club retreat, and who, I don't know, maybe I ranked a little bit higher because I finished their books while I was in Arizona with them. The first is Lucinda Berry's Keep Your Friends Close. As I mentioned in the reading vlog that I filmed while I was in Arizona, this was Lucinda Berry's second time at the retreat. We chose a book of hers to read and discuss last year, and because I didn't want to read that book, I didn't spend as much time at the retreat. I was sort of out being a tourist instead. This year, because there were 5 authors there, we didn't have specific book club type discussions about any of the books. But I did feel bad that I didn't read her book last year, so I decided to read Keep Your Friends Close. And this is about a mommy group that is rocked when the leader of the group is murdered at her house during a girls' night with everyone else in the group. And it really walks you through the internal combustion of the group and some of the people in the group that this causes. Secrets come out, lives get blown apart, and whodunit is definitely secondary to just watching all of this psychological drama go on. It was messy. It was like watching, I don't watch reality TV, so I would imagine it's like why people watch shows like The Real Housewives. It had that sort of a hint, a flavor to it. And then Home is Where the Bodies Are by Geneva Rose. I am so happy that I enjoyed this book so much. I've been following Geneva Rose for a really long time, and I just think she's extremely dry-witted and funny and humorous. And so this is the book where 3 siblings are in their mother's home after her passing to basically clean it out. And their father had abandoned them several years previously. And when they are cleaning out the house and dividing up the things according to what their mother left in her will, they have some VHS tapes, some home movies, and because they're sort of bickering and thinking about how unhappy they are with each other and how jealous of each other that they are, and the resentments from being a family that started out not being dysfunctional but became dysfunctional along the way, and they don't really understand why, and then they were already dysfunctional and then their dad left. Why did he leave? Was it because of their dysfunctional relationships? They decide to put on a VHS tape of a happier time, and it takes them back to a time when they were in, the oldest daughter was in high school. I think the younger daughter was in high school, and then the son was maybe in middle school, elementary school. And their mother is out filming in their yard basically, and her father comes running up and he's covered in blood, and he basically takes her down to a creek on the property where there is a dead neighbor girl. And they, of course, want to figure out what happened. Did he really kill her? What is going on? And it opens a door to like more killings than they knew about or realized, and more secrets. And I think that there are some things that are hinted along the way that seem like you kind of read through the lines and you figure things out. But for some reason that didn't matter so much to me. And the whodunit really definitely matters here. So although this is a thriller, the whodunit matters. And finally, the last book of the month and my first 5-star read of the year, which is ironically a reread, and I'm giving it a higher score than I did the first time I read it, is The Sweetness at the Bottom of the Pie by Alan Bradley. This is historical again. So I read a lot of historical over the last 2 months, which I've been enjoying, obviously. But this was a reread. I had originally given it a 4.5 stars when I read it the first time, and I did want to see if it held up. So I was extremely pleased that, yeah, I gave it a 5. So great book, and very happy with the reading. So that is it. That is everything I read in January and February. And thanks for watching. Tell your pets I said hi, and I'll see you next time.